Hello. I probably shouldn't be this lenient towards how high of a placement I'm putting this at, but seeing that Bruce Campbell showed up for a post-credit stinger of an Evil Dead remake that was surprisingly really good was probably the best day of my life as a young horror fan. He never showed up in Evil Dead Rise, but hey, Ash vs. the Evil Dead was released in between those two, so maybe it was a teaser for that, I don't know. God, Walk Hard needs more love. It honestly makes me sad that not many people know about this movie. Like, seriously, if you haven't seen it yet, please do. It's absolutely hilarious. John C. Reilly is amazing in it, and considering that the mid-2000s was pretty much drowning in overtly serious Oscar bait biopics on popular musicians, it only felt fair that there was a movie out there that mercilessly made fun of them all. And this post-credit scene is a pretty good example of that, being this post-mortem look into some footage of the actual Dewey Cox, who is also played by John C. Reilly. I love how much of a dedication to a bit that is. This one was surprisingly pretty intense for an after-credit scene. It probably goes to show that I haven't seen the rest of Earth to Echo to know the context behind it, but rest assured that I would have shat myself if I saw this scene when I was younger.
Mr. Tambourine Man!
Probably should have expected that from it being a found footage movie. Yeah, the fun thing about this movie is that it's in the same camp as Chronicle and Project X as one of those rare found footage movies that's not horror. Wish I could say literally anything else interesting about it, but you know, what are you gonna do? Alright, I'm just gonna say this, these movies are terrible, but by God, Hank Azaria is probably the only actor in this entire thing who's actually giving 100%. I genuinely love that Gargamel and Azrael here are bitching and fighting like they're an old married couple. You know, maybe I just like post-credit scenes that only serve to troll the viewer for waiting in the theater for so long. And I will admit to saying that this is the only MCU post-credit scene post-Endgame that I actually kinda sorta like. Though maybe it's because I still have enough respect for the Deadpool series to even put it above some of the MCU's weaker plot-heavy post-credit scenes. But it's still good. All I have to say about Flo's after-credit scene is that the water looks gorgeous and that there's a pretty cool-looking whale in the background. Now let me note that I haven't seen this movie yet, so I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Hi, so I'm filming this like a couple of hours before the Oscars happen, and so I did see Flo in preparation for that, and honestly it's a really good movie. It's very breathtaking, very cute, it gives you such a lust for life, and I will say, that whale is cool. It always has, and it always will be. That is a cool, cool whale. Love you, man. Just when after-credit scenes started to lose their magic, John Wick 4, which is apparently not the final film in the series. This doesn't mean that cinema is saved, okay? Just because there's a new John Wick movie coming out, it's sadly still Marvel's world, and that we're all still collectively living in it. Like, look at the box office for Brave New World. It has already made its money back. That company scares me sometimes. Shows us that they could still be pretty damn suspenseful and can leave you wanting more. Gratifyingly awesome, just like the whole series itself. Take your time, John Wick Chapter 5. We're all rooting for you. I don't know what's weirder, the fact that this post-credit scene was a contractual obligation, or that there is a scene in a movie about the making of The Room where Tommy Wiseau is talking to James Franco playing Tommy Wiseau. Still, I'm kind of glad they put this scene in there as a special little bonus, because if it was in the movie proper, it would have grinded the momentum of this movie to a complete halt. And that would be bullshit. It would not ruin momentum of movie. It will not. Oh, hi, Tommy. Bet you didn't know this movie had a post-credit scene. Apparently this was supposed to be an inside joke relating to Howard Jarvis's side job as a businessman, so that's pretty cool, I suppose. Okay, I have never seen or even heard of this movie, but by God, I want to know the story behind this Mantis guy. Kinda reminds me of that one episode of Poppy the Performer where he eats a frog and ends up getting the powers of a frog. God, that show was so weird. Considering that this was the last film in the series before Endgame came out, Ant-Man and the Wasp's post-credit stinger might be the most darkly comedic thing Disney has ever done. And I've seen Something Wicked This Way Comes. The eerie silence with the emergency signal going off in the background all while there's a giant ant playing on an electric drum set is both really funny and genuinely unsettling at the same time. Bottom line, I would really like to thank Disney for adding the giant tarantula from the ending of Enemy to the MCU. We all knew Jake Gyllenhaal would make it in somehow. I get that this scene is a sort of homage to the movie The Great Train Robbery from 1903, but what does this even mean for Frank Lucas? Especially since he pretty much tattled on the entire mob in order to clear his name, so is he just going back to shooting people afterwards? Still though, I really like how stylistic that last shot was. I know that I am majorly bending the rules just to include this, but that coda to the whole dance scene that happens during here was just so awesome and is such a perfect capper to Lynch's whole filmography. How could I not include it? Also, knowing Lynch, this was probably a studio mandate thing, so of course I'm gonna include on the list. Fight me. I know the title of my channel might have been a big fat dead giveaway, but when I was 15 years old, I used to be a huge fan of the X-Men series. Not enough to see any of them in cinemas, how the last two films at the time were both rated 15, so there was no way in hell that I was going to be allowed to watch them, but from the ones that I did see, a bunch of films about adolescent teens with superpowers really spoke to me in a very bizarre way. And Days of Future Past, which was at the time my least favorite movie of the series, I was a very dumb kid at the time, was the first movie I had ever seen where there was an actual physical after credit scene. At the time, I didn't even know that movies had a life after the credits, and that it could tease the next film that comes after it in a very abstractly vague way. This is awesome! And I absolutely hate it. Go back to George Costanza screaming at the audience.
Good night, everybody!
This scene's just really funny. Not just because of it being a book that Lockhart wrote while he was suffering from amnesia, but because I really want to see what a psych ward looks like in this universe. I mean, if Azkaban Prison can look like a giant evil box of Toblerones, then why shouldn't we see what happens when a wizard gets committed? I know I'm gonna come off as extremely biased here, but come on, it's Yoshi. Why wouldn't I put it at number 6 here? Brian Cox of the Irish band Dream, seriously, starts playing the song Things Can Only Get Better on the keyboard when Timmy comes in and unplugs the whole set. To this day, I don't know why they decided to go for such an obscure reference for the after-credit scene of Shaun the Sheep 2. But the gag itself is pretty funny, and I like that they play an instrumental version of the show's theme once it cuts to black. There's something about it that's a touch sentimental. I love how the post-credit scene here takes place immediately after the ending, as if it took Dark that long to realize what just transpired. Can't say I blame him though. It feels so weird that I'm talking about this movie twice in one video, and honestly, can you really blame me? This one pays tribute to the pointing meme. The pointing meme. Of course it's going to get the number 3 spot. Can you really blame me? It's such a weird way to end the movie. It's like an Adult Swim joke, and the way Mignon starts to flutter in the air at the end. Alright, before we start out this segment, I have to make things very clear. This movie is silly. And I'm not saying this because this was like one of my childhood favorite movies, but I genuinely really love this movie. It doesn't take itself seriously at all, but that's kind of part of the charm for it. And that charm is carried over to the after credits scene where Ben Stiller sings the untouchable nostalgia classic Milkshake by Kellis. Side note about my personal experience with this song, I genuinely didn't know this movie was about Kellis's boob milk until fairly recently. It took me way too long to realize that there was no actual milkshake involved with that. Honestly, this gesture here should have been hint number 1.
You happy? Fatty make a funny?
Monsters, Inc. is my favorite Pixar film. Mike decides to put on a play, which I know was just a throwaway gag from earlier in the movie, but it just goes to show how committed he really was to the whole musical thing. Mike is the Andrew Lloyd Webber of the monster world. He even has one of those awkward, slow-tempo musical numbers like in Evita and Cats, and it was the basis for a one-off Waterloo Watermelon video. Granted that this scene does play during the credits in some versions of the film, which is why it's not on the list proper, but I would be hit or miss if I didn't even mention it at least once. Pete Docter and crew put way too much effort into something that most people were going to miss because it was placed in during the credits, and I gotta say, I admire the dedication. Good job. Alright, call me biased here because the Jackass series was pretty much born and bred to be a show that I would really, really like. But yeah, Jackass the movie has my favorite post-credit scene of all time. Not just because the idea of it is funny on its own with everyone thinking that they would still do these dangerous stunts up until their 70s. Not just because it's a pretty fun full circle moment considering how the movie opens, how it even uses the same music. Hell, I don't even think it's because I think the number 63 is funny, but because they all die in the most gruesome, over-the-top, and goriest ways possible. Except for Steve-O. This scene is just chaos to the highest margin, with it being shot like an action scene straight out of Saving Private Ryan. But because I have to give Tony Gardner credit here, there's some really amazing makeup work on display here. They really do look like old men, and it kinda adds to the surreal humor of it all. It is an utterly insane way to end the movie, and I absolutely adore it for it.
Yeah, dude.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. Should post-credit scenes die? Well, I want them to be used more in moderation, but outside of that, no, not really. Post-credit scenes are sadly a dying art, not just because of its over-commercialized teases in movies that really didn't need them, but because nobody knows how to do them right anymore. If you want to do one nowadays, even if it doesn't or and will never tie into any franchise, at least have some fun with them instead of doing the exact same thing everyone else is doing. And that's what the best ones have in common. They're one-off gags, epilogues, punchlines to previously unfinished jokes. There is a correct way of doing them which most movies aren't taking advantage of, and that's the unexpectedness of them. I said that wrong. And that's the unexpectedness of them. So yeah, they should keep going if it means that we're going to get a lot more ones that think outside the box with how they tie into the film's context. That leaves one question. Will there be an after-credit scene to this video?